this sake of time, we would open the discussion and join us in this discussion. So whoever would like to pose a question, here.
Thank you all very much. So I have a question to pose to all what you all said like now. So to Dr. Portugal, to the Professor Costa, and of course to the scientist. So it seems that the crisis is there. So the scientists who present the data, they present independent data. They didn't know each other. They didn't get like together before. They didn't agree on the data. So it's clear that we are living a moment of crisis, right? And on the other hand, it's clear that it's difficult to economically adapt, right? So it takes time, and Dr. Portugal said like 20 years or 30 years is actually like an extremely fast time for economical substrate, right? So now my question is, or my observation, or provocation also. So when there is an economical crisis, we are very good in promoting and tolerating and accepting austerity. So if you remember in 2008, there was like this global crisis and people lost their jobs. Salaries didn't go up. Banks didn't give loan anymore. It was impossible to build. It was impossible to renew things. It was impossible to buy cars for people. People died and committed suicide because they couldn't pay their debts, okay? So, but everybody accepted because it was the economic crisis and we went to austerity. It was austerity promoted from the central region of Europe. Now we have a crisis which is unanimously accepted, but nobody says we should go into austerity.
For climate change. Okay, who wants to go first?
Well, I don't think we need to. And this is an economic problem, it's been talked about before. The economics are stacked against action on climate change right now. So this is a statistic that the UK climate envoy, Nick Bridge, from the FCO, from the Commonwealth Office, says a lot. So it's not my statistic, it's his. But there is more money given to oil and gas companies, direct subsidy, so they can explore and get it out the ground, more money globally on that than there is globally on healthcare. That's the economy that we have at the moment. There's enough money in the system. It's going into finding more of the stuff that we don't need. So what we need is a different type of economy. And of course, ultimately, it will look radical compared to what it is now. I.e., the taxes, our taxes will have to be have to have our carbon footprint taken into consideration. Why wouldn't they? Public procurement will have to have emissions taken into consideration. They don't at the moment. Why shouldn't they? And of course, the transition won't be step. It won't be one day we don't do it and the next day everything will happen. It will be incremental. But the destination is obvious. It will look, in 30 years' time, looking back today, that a very different system. But that the economics will have to shift. And if the economics shifts, then you get incentives, then you get the opportunity to stop burning fossil fuels, to start investing in renewables, to consume less, right? Definitely consume less, to fly less, absolutely. We will never stop flying, I'm convinced of that, but we have so many other ways to connect the planet up these days through text messaging, Twitter, social media, Skypes, you name it, right? So we can do that, and I think everyone has to do it. This isn't something that politicians can sort out. It's not something that businesses can sort out. It's not something that individuals can sort out. We all have to do it together. It's something that everyone has to play a part in, and I think we're coming to a realization of that. The last 10 years, the last 2 years, have seen an amazing transformation in our appreciation of this problem. And that won't stop. That's not going to go away. I can only see this getting more. I asked Paul Pullman, who was the CEO of Unilever, visionary CEO of Unilever, getting them to be low carbon, showing great leadership. And when I see politicians and business people to say it's too difficult, the economics don't work, what I'm listening to that, what I'm hearing is a lack of leadership, right? It can be done, right? And to say, well, it's just too difficult to do it, possibly we've got the wrong people in the jobs to do that. So I think that's what we need. There's a lot of vested interests at play, probably a very small number of people holding those vested interests, but there are some people that are making a lot of money with the economy shaped the way it is. And I'm afraid that is going to have to change as well. Sorry, that was my contribution. Thank you very much.
It was a really interesting question to Davide. I think we are all voters. We vote every single 4 or 5 years. It depends on the country and which election we are talking about. So, as voters, we have a role to play on society, and we are customers too. And Martin was talking about this shift that we are already feeling, that the public opinion is changing, and the new generations, I think there is a growing movement that they are willing to shift the way they consume. And I think to achieve this global commitment of having a carbon market, of aiding the less developed countries by the developed countries, is something that, unfortunately, because of 30 years of political inactivity or inaction, it will be a bottom-up approach, and it will be because of public opinion. We'll vote differently, and in some sense, the politicmans, they will realize that they have to take action about it. And again, about economy, I think the customers, as we are clients, customers of flights, I'm flying less. And for instance, in the climate change community in the Central Europe, because they have fast trains and they have nice connection, not in the Southern Europe, unfortunately, not in Portugal, because 30 years ago we didn't build a nice train to connect us to Europe, and now we have to fly. But people is flying. There is a minus 15% of people of flights in the research community in the Scandinavian countries, and they also have to commute a lot. So there are some signals, and I try to be optimistic about these signals. And I think people has to include this thing that we cannot afford. We have finite resources. Of course, we have technological development, but the pace that we have to change has not to rely only on technology, because we will not be on time for the changes that are projected. And as I finished my presentation, I think it's very selfish that we don't think that everything that we can mitigate now, it's less consequence for many people, and those many people, they are mostly on underdeveloped countries. And I only want to finish with this. We had a very, very stupid, sorry for the word that I use, but we had a very stupid crisis with 1 million people coming to Europe, as you know. We have the upsurge of populist movements. We had an Europe that is very, very strange nowadays, because 1 million people try to make a life in Europe. And now, what we project, and for instance in Africa and Middle East, and in Latin America, and all these movements, we project 250 million people being displaced in 2050. It's not a long time, it's 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, okay. So these magnitudes what kind of world we will have. About the airports, we have
We're gonna
we
figure
have
out
been
where
t-
to
we-
build
we
the
have been
airport before
talking
we leave.
about that. The Portuguese, some Portuguese researchers, Carlos is there. He did a study about the flooding of the Montijo airport, and we together we tried to show that there is a very important probability that in some years we will have the airport flooded. Thank you.
Wait, Dr. Did you want to?
Yes, a very quick comment on on
Austerity
austerity, the idea of austerity, and the idea of austerity was a political idea that was launched because it was considered by the political decision makers because for solving a financial crisis. It's not an idea for giving hope to people, and in that sense, it's something that it's basically was in the space of politics and not the space of policy. So space of policy is about giving hope to people, and in that sense, when we look at climate change, we have to look at it as an opportunity to change, not only to reduce the emissions, but the emission reduction, it's the consequence of we change our industrial model that served us very well during the last 150 years and brought into the let's say to the comfort that we use and we experience every day, millions of people. The point is that it's not sustainable anymore, that this industrial model. Another consideration is that we have to throw away the industrial model and replace for something that will come to replace it. It's not, it won't be like that. It's not like that, it's happening now. The industrial model will be complemented by a model in which we'll be taking care of the energy content and material content of products, and we'll take those products to a longer lives by reconstruction, remanufacturing, and switching the way we use energy and we use labor and capital in the industrial model. In the industrial model, we use, for producing something as value to the consumer, we use 75% of capital and material and energy and 25% of labor. When we look at the performance economy, we look the time frame we use to consider all the life cycle. So you extend the life cycle of the products. We'll switch this balance. So it will be 75% of labor, so a renewal resource, and we'll create jobs and highly skilled jobs for people, and we'll use only 25% of energy and materials. So exergy, which is energy translated into useful work, will be less. So we'll be growing, keeping consumption and usage better than consumption, usage level at the expectations of all those people that will be coming to the middle class and coming to the economy in the next years, next decade.
But what would be the rate at which this shift is
That's
going to
the
happen?
problem.
Does it fit with the models of the scientists in terms
That's
of...
the problem. That's the problem. The problem is we have to finance. We have to invest on this shift. And first, you hear from the European Commission now, the president of the European Commission said, well, we need a new deal, a new Green Deal. But what is about this new Green Deal? It has to, for instance, the incentives, the economic incentives to internalize, for companies to internalize waste and the risk of the product life cycle has to be in there, that new deal. But to do that, companies have to invest in terms of changing the business model, because it is like a car. If you sell a car, you don't care anymore if the car, what happens to the car during the life cycle of usage. But when you sell the car, you are responsible for all the life cycle. If you think a car, you think of a fridge,
Indeed.
or think a toaster. Oh, the business is different because you are in the business of taking care of the product until it will be dismantled and will be just re-injected into the economy. So it's really a different business model for companies. And first, you need to give incentives in terms of regulations and policy, definitely. It's the way things, if you want to change fast, you have to give incentives to companies. But again, be careful, because you may create not a level playing field between your companies in your country, on your region, in Europe in particular, and the rest of regions that won't be doing the same kind of commitment
Indeed.
to change. So it's a very complex, but austerity, coming again about austerity, austerity is not a long-term policy. Fighting climate change and changing the industrial model, it's a long-term investment, it's a long-term goal, and it's something that may bring hope to people, hope to have better jobs, hope to have better environment, hope to make more money in the business. Austerity doesn't allow any of one of these things, at least for my understanding of austerity.
Maybe we'll have to come up with another austerity way.
But I
There's
understand your provocation.
So, very briefly, I think we will have as much time to adapt as nature will give us anyway, so better to be fast. But anyway, anyhow, from the talk from our last speaker, apparently, even if we stop emit now, we will still have this CO2 in the atmosphere to deal with anyway, and it won't go away. So, and I think that someone in the audience make this question about how to get rid of the CO2 and if we have other options, and we talked about the oceans. But I think that what he was mentioning to or alluding to, it's the technological options that are starting to be built up. Can you elaborate a bit about that? Is it really sustainable or not?
So are there...
Because I think it's a good source of investment.
Thank you.
So
Yeah.
are there ways to get rid of the CO2 in the atmosphere?
Yeah,
that
thank
we
you. I
have
should have
already?
said, other than the natural ways to do it, and those are quite good. Yes, there are, and there's a lot of research that's going on to make the technologies that we know about now, make them more efficient. So we know how to take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, direct air capture and taking it out, but it's quite expensive. Costs energy to do it, and it therefore costs money. So if you had a carbon capture facility in a power station, you'd essentially need another power station to make the energy that's needed, about a third of the size. And so therefore the electricity that you'll be selling will be clean, but it will be 30% more expensive than otherwise would be, and that will be difficult economically to make it work. Now, you could subsidize that. Right? You could choose to do that, and that might be a way to do it. But the big gains, I think, are in chemistry and in chemical engineering to make the processes much more efficient, so that we drive that cost right down. And I think that direct air capture is something that is we're going to see a lot more of, because it could be a really important way to offset emissions from other sources. The zero carbon commitment by 2050 that countries are forming, that is net zero. That means there will be emissions, but they have to be offset somewhere else. And planting trees is not going to do it, unfortunately, because they take too long to grow to offset it. So you need immediate action. But you could do that with direct air capture. You could actually draw the carbon dioxide down out of the atmosphere and then store it, or make it into something like building materials or something, and then use it. So there are ways to do it, but there's a lot of progress that's needed in the chemical engineering to make it happen. But places are working on that. Thank you. Sorry?
For the
Yes,
synthesis
free.
is
That's
cheap.
right.
Indeed. Anyone else?
Good evening. I am a member of the Italian Association of Researchers in Portugal, so thank you very much for being here and for the interesting discussion. I work in artificial intelligence, and as you know, in the last few years, artificial intelligence had a large development, in particular in the field of data science. And I really feel that the methods of artificial intelligence are very much underused for the problematics that we are talking about today. I'm thinking, for instance, about simulation systems, about optimization, about decision support systems, control systems, but also newer technologies like invention machines, known for their creativity, like, for instance, genetic programming. All this is much underused compared to many other applicative fields. I'm thinking, for instance, about medicine, about economy, about marketing. In these other fields, we have much more investments by academia than in the field that we are talking about today. I wonder if you agree, and I wonder if you know why.
Do you agree with the investing in?
I agree that there is some underdevelopment when we compare it with the areas that you refer to, but in fact, in the last years there is a very large increase of methods, of statistical downscaling methods, of machine learning automata, to precisely do what I talked about. For instance, the statistical downscaling methodologies to get climate change information at a local scale with machine learning techniques, for instance. So there are many projects and consortiums about getting people from this kind of new methods to the climate science nowadays. But it's quite recent.
Well, another field, I mean, where artificial intelligence is now compulsory to be used is in the field of Earth observation. And Earth observation, I mean, is very useful for climate change studies. Nowadays, we have several satellites orbiting around the Earth, and we collecting so many data. And we have the need to analyze all those data pixel by pixel, which will take probably a huge amount of people, but that can be done just with artificial intelligence. And there is a lot of effort, I mean, in this field, because we can get real-time analysis of those data that are collecting and accumulating in supercomputer and super memories, of course, of data, because a huge amount of data. So this is very, very important, because satellites like the Sentinels of Copernicus, or rather the Landsat, or many other satellites are actually helping a lot in modeling and in understanding what is happening to our Earth, and getting refine our knowledge on this.
It almost sounds like we're using AI to understand what's happening and what may be happening in the future, not to actually fight the problem. Because I think that would be a bit of the question, that to use funding to a certain direction of research that would allow us to fight the changes more than analyzing and giving the data, which is precious for people to understand, but we need, as it's been mentioned before, we need a shift of paradigm, and this needs to happen fairly quickly.
I can still add on this. The fact is that Earth system models and regional climate models at high resolution, they are very expensive computationally. So what we can do, and what we are already doing, is with artificial intelligence, is to mimic the behavior, the physical behavior of these very complex models, to have a large spectrum of, for instance, to characterize uncertainty or different trajectories of different forcings and these kind of things. So, and interplaying within the climate system with different kind of societal pathways, for instance. Okay, and this is part of the solution, of course.
Just to give a brief comment on the business side of applications, because there will be traction for applying for more research. What we see now in the market is basically it's a moving target, because the classic machine learning techniques, statistic techniques are there for many years, but now in the last 10 years, the advances are in deep learning and other techniques very become for the common citizen or the common business guy like black boxes, because no one understands very well with all those fancy names. But the point is, every business, one of the greatest, if I can name one single feature of the fourth industrial revolution, it's basically the ability to make automated decisions, intelligent decisions, automate decisions in the business. So this has to be with automated learning techniques and tools, and that has to be as by application of what is available in the market. What we see is the businesses, they are most in a wait and see stance, because things seems to be so fast. But the point is, ultimately, they will be applied in every field of the business, because most of the decision making in the business is one of the most important ingredients is prediction. And machine learning is very good. We are about in climate change and climate problems, and the interaction between business and climate and environment. It's about prediction something. So prediction, if we use those automated decision making techniques to make better predictions, will help the business to improve their performance. So what we see is that we are moving to make better predictions, but will ultimately, it's not a problem of technology. Technology will be available, but the problem will be a managerial problem of incorporating in a business process these prediction capabilities, and also a regulatory problem, because GDPR, Article 22, requires explainability of the algorithm and transparency. It's written on the law. So when you move to advanced techniques for machine learning that looks like black boxes, so they are not explaining, self-explaining, you just end with confronting with problems of biasing, with non-robust models, and problems like that. So actually, we'll see, it's what we see in the market, some simple applications in automating decisions by making better predictions, but ultimately bringing those advanced techniques into the business will be more complicated in the next years. Business are very conservative in terms of adoption of technologies that are not very well understood. So AI, the front runners in AI, there's a lot of time in order that we can achieve secure, safe technology to apply in, let's say, everyday business.
Okay, I'm really sorry to have to cut the discussion short, but fear not, there will be the opportunity to continue discussing even more informally with our speakers in the cocktail next door. But we need to vacate the room soon. So before we leave, I would just like to make some final remarks. And in the name of IPASSIA, thank the presence of everybody that was here today and made this event possible, particularly our panel, for their generosity in coming to share their knowledge and be available to answer our questions. And this event would not have been possible without the support of the Italian Embassy, the Institute of Culture, the Italian Institute of Culture, the British Embassy, and the Champalimaud Foundation. For all the scientists in the room, and perhaps our panel here as well, we would just like to draw your attention to an initiative that has been going on, which is called Scientists for Future. An international, and there's also a Portuguese initiative, which basically aims at uniting scientists around this topic of climate change and how science can help analyze, predict, and come up with new strategies to fight this global and common problem. If you want more information, there are some posters outside with the QR codes that you can use to just have the information available. Stay tuned for future events organized by IPASSI, because they are coming up in the months that are to come. More information on their contacts outside. I would personally like to thank IPASSI for inviting me and allowing me to be part of this initiative. And thank you very much. And then we can continue conversation in the cocktail time. Thank you.